Hello and good day to you. Now, are your chord progressions starting to sound the same, or are you struggling to come up with progressions for your songs? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. But today I'm going to show you great ways to fix that and get a better understanding of the things that really matter to be creative with chord progressions in a smart way. We're going to break down the 4 chord types that are found in the major scale, and we'll use chord functions to build beautiful progressions. And to make things stand out, we'll also add stepwise motion to glue everything together, and even spice things up with secondary dominants and some beautiful borrowed chords. So let's unlock some superpowers for your songwriting right now. Now, to follow this tutorial, it is best that you have some understanding of the concept of major and minor triads and the major scale. Now first, let's look at the chord types that we'll find in the major scale. Now when we build chords in that major scale, we'll get 3 essential chord types. We'll get a major chord on the 1st, 4th and 5th degree. And we'll get a minor chord on the 2nd, 3rd and 6th degree. And we'll get a diminished chord on the 7th degree. And just listen how each chord feels as you play these in a row. So, happy, sad, sad, happy, happy, sad, and weird. Now in common, the major chords feel strong, and the minor chords feel emotional and weaker, and the diminished chord is dissonant and full of tension. Now, did you get that same feeling? Now these chords are called triads, and they are a stack of 2 third intervals. Major, minor, and diminished. Now we can also make 7th chords by adding yet another third interval to the chord. Now the chords will sound more colorful and richer. And now we'll get 4 essential chord types instead of 3. We'll get a major 7th chord on the 1st and 4th degree. We'll get a minor 7th chord on the 2nd, 3rd and 6th degree. We get a dominant 7th chord on the 5th degree. And we'll get a half diminished chord on the 7th degree. Now again, listen how each chord feels as you play them in a row. Now next up are the chord functions, and these chord functions will help us to make a sensible chord progression that sounds nice and logical. So we can distinguish 3 chord functions. One is the tonic, one is the subdominant, or also known as predominant, and one is the real dominant. Now all chords in the major scale have one of these functions, as we will see soon. Now chords with a tonic function feel like home, and they feel like the end of a song, for instance. It is the chord with the least amount of tension, and every other chord in the scale resolves to that tonic chord. Chords with a subdominant function often precede the dominant. They prepare for the dominant and move away from the tonic. Also, the 4 chord can lead straight to the tonic chord, creating a more gentle resolution. And this is called a plagal cadence. Now, chords with a dominant function are chords that bring the music back to the tonic. It has lots of tension and strongly wants to resolve to the home chord, the tonic. Now in the major key, all chords have one of these 3 functions. The 1st and 6th degree are chords with the tonic function, and these are very stable. The 3rd degree has loosely a tonic function too, since it has 2 notes in common with the actual tonic on the 1st degree. The 2nd and 4th degree are chords that have a so-called subdominant function. They sound open and emotional. The 5th and 7th degree are chords with a dominant function, and they drive to resolve to a chord with a tonic function. Now in the minor key, we have about the same idea regarding the chord functions, only the quality, major and minor, is very different. Now a minor scale is a major scale starting on the 6th degree, on the 6th note. This means that A minor has the same notes as C major. Now they are called relative scales. Having the same notes means that they have the same chords too. Now, as you can see, the type of chord on each degree, comparing to the major scale, is different. Now, let's compare the chords of the C major and C minor scale. In a minor key, the chords with a tonic function are a minor and 2 major chords. The chords with a subdominant function are the diminished and minor chord. And chords with a dominant function are now a minor and a major chord. And I must say the minor chord is often replaced by a major chord to make it more of a dominant sound. So in a minor key, the chord functions on each degree stay the same, only the quality is now changed. So why should you use chord functions? Now the answer is simple. If we look at the C major scale, then we can mark the notes of the tonic chord, C, E and G. Now these notes will have the least amount of tension. And that is logical because they are part of the homecoming tonic chord. All the other notes, D, F, A and B, create a certain amount of tension that want to resolve to the nearest note of the tonic that is a half step away if possible. Such a half step, by the way, we call a leading tone or leading note. Now the more tension notes a chord contains and the more leading tones this causes, the more tension a chord will have and the more it wants to resolve to the tonic. Now when we use 7th chords, it gets even more significant. The dominants G dominant 7 and B minor 7 flat 5 in the key of C major both contain the most dissonant interval in the scale, namely the tritone. In the key of C major, that is the interval between the B and F or F and B, and both are tritone intervals. It's a distance of 3 whole steps, also called an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth. This interval is so unstable that it badly wants to resolve to the root and third of the tonic chord. And this makes the dominant to tonic progression, G dominant 7 to C major, the strongest cadence and resolution in music. Now another reason that the 5-1 relation works so well is because the bass notes of the root notes of the chords move in fifths. And these intervals feel super logical and strong. So everything in music that has a 5-1 or the inverted 5-1, which is a 4-1 relation, sounds strong and sturdy. Now the most obvious progression when making use of chord functions is a tonic, subdominant, dominant, tonic progression. So let's look at the possibilities for this worldwide proven concept. Now we could play a C major, F major, G major, C major progression. Or a C major, D minor, G major, C major progression, which contains the staple in jazz and classical music, the notorious 2-5-1. D minor, G, C major. Besides the chord functions, also the 5-1 relation between each chord is important. The root notes of these chords move in fifths and fourths. In this case, D to G and G to C. And this results in a super strong chord change. Or we can play a C major, D minor, G major, A minor progression. Or combine chords with the same function, for instance C to A minor, D minor to F, B diminished to G with a B in the bass, and C. But there are more combinations that work well and are used a lot by songwriters. For instance, progressions that use the Playgall 4-1 cadence. It sounds much softer and milder than the 5-1 progression. Now we got a 1-5-6-4 progression, so tonic dominant, tonic subdominant. And we'll find this progression in songs like With or Without You by U2 or And Let It Go from the musical Frozen. So in the key of C major, we'll get C major 7, G dominant 7, A minor 7 and F major 7. Now another staple in modern pop and rock is the 6-4-1-5 progression. where we use the suspended dominant chord. And this chord adds again an extra layer of tension, and that sounds so nice. So tonic, subdominant, tonic, suspended dominant, and the common dominant. In the key of C major, we get, for instance, A minor 7, F major 7, C major, and G sus4 to G. Now, a progression used in many ballads is the 4-1-5-6 progression. F major 7, C major 7, C7 sus4 to A minor 7. Here the dominant resolves to the minor 6 chord, creating a so-called deceptive cadence. It ends, but it leaves room for elaboration of the progression. And the suspended dominant chord results in a less harsh resolve to the A minor 7 chord, because the dissonant tritone is disabled by the sus4, CF, instead of BF. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Now next we'll look at some things to make these progressions a little more interesting. Now you've learned that the dominant pulls the music to the tonic chord, like Idiots to Power. But we can deploy those strong dominants for all chords in the scale too. For that, understand that every chord has a dominant. It's the major or dominant 7th chord that lies a fifth away from the root of that chord. For instance, E dominant 7 is the dominant chord for A minor, and D dominant 7 is the dominant chord for G major, and so on. So we can do this for every chord in the C major scale except for the dissonant diminished chord on the 7th degree, because there will be no resolution because of its instability. So A dominant 7 is the dominant for D minor, and B dominant 7 for E minor. C dominant 7 is a dominant for F, D dominant 7 for G major, and E dominant 7 for A minor. Now the name of these outside the key dominant is secondary dominant. As an example, we could play this progression in C major. C, E, A minor, C, B, 7, E minor, and G. The E major chord and B dominant 7 chord are obviously outside the key of C major and function as dominants for respectively the A minor and E minor chord. It adds just that little extra color and flavor to the progression so that it stays fresh and interesting. Now next up is stepwise motion. Now stepwise motion in a progression is always a successful tool to enhance a simple progression, like for instance the 1-4-5-1 cadence, tonic, subdominant, dominant, tonic progression, to something better. Now there are two ways, using stepwise chord movement and using stepwise bass movement. So let's start with chord movement. We'll just fill up the space between the chords with the chords that lie in between those chords. Look at this 1-4-5-1 progression in C major. Now going from C major to F major, we'll fill up the space with the D minor 7 and E minor 7 chord. And so we get the stepwise motion. Now during the time of the subdominant, we use the stepwise motion to change from one subdominant to the other. So we'll use the F major 7 chord and E minor 7 chord to change to the D minor 7 chord. And this is how it sounds. Now also stepwise motion in a bass line is a good idea. Take the famous pachelbel progression in C major. It is a 1, 5, 6, 3, 4, 1, 4, 5 progression. Very famous. And we can make a descending bass line by using inversions of some chords. An inversion, by the way, is a chord where the bass is a chord tone other than the tonic, like in this example. Now, as you can see, every other chord is an inversion, and this creates a nice and smooth descending bass line. And it sounds like this. The first thing that we're going to do is using a technique that is called modal interchange, which simply means that we will mix chords from the minor scale with the chords from the major scale, like C major and C minor. Now these are called parallel keys. On each degree we'll find different type of chords. We're going to borrow chords from one key and insert them to the other. Now, oversimplified, we could do something like this. If the original progression is C major, F major, A minor, G major, then we could substitute the F major chord with the F minor chord from the C minor key and the A minor chord with the A flat major chord from the same C minor key. And we'll get this. Now this sounds already a kind of special, right? Now some relations work better than others. And this goes for chords too. And in this case, substituting the 4 chord with chords from the minor parallel key work great. Chords in the C minor key that can function as a 4 chord in the C major key are the 2nd and 4th degree, the D minor 7 flat 5 chord and the F minor 7 chord. But also the 6th and 7th degree, A flat major 7 and B flat 7, work well as a 4 chords too. So let's change a super standard progression with this technique, like a 1, 4, 5, 1 progression, which is a tonic, subdominant, dominant, tonic progression. Now we could play C, A flat, F minor and G major. Or we could play C major 7, B flat 7, A flat major 7 and G7. Or this gem of a progression, C major 7, F minor 7, B flat and G sus4. So what have we actually learned from this all? Well, we have seen what chord types can be found in the major scale and thus in the minor scale too. I have showed you the 3 chord functions, tonic, subdominant and dominant, and explained how each chord in the scale can be assigned to one of these chord functions. We have seen that using chord functions instantly result in well-sounding progressions because of the tension notes in the scale and the tritone interval that is present in the dominant 7th chord. We've also seen how to make use of chord functions to come up with strong and logical progressions that helps you to write good sounding songs. And we have seen some standard progressions and added special chords to enhance the progression for the better. Like, for instance, by using a secondary dominant, using stepwise motion and using modal interchange. With all this knowledge, it should now be easier for you to understand the mechanics of making music, and for most it should be easier to make some super nice music. Now, I hope this was crystal clear. And check the ebook store for ebooks about all kinds of interesting subjects that will help you to make some awesome noise. Now, I hope to see you next time in another tutorial. Bye!